So a very warm welcome to everyone watching this, and we hope you've been looking after yourself and your family. So today, the 10th of October, is World Mental Health Day, with the theme of mental health in an unequal world. Now, although we have all been impacted by the pandemic, we have not been affected equally. And COVID-19 has highlighted how inequalities in our society can have real consequences for people's health. Those from deprived areas, those unemployed, or those from minorities can have lower access to the support services for common mental health issues. Now, we all have a greater awareness of our mental health. It has a name and we have a definition that we understand. We know to speak to our doctor or a loved one or to look online for support. However, it doesn't stop it being an incredibly difficult and challenging experience. And sometimes with all the advice and support around us, we can still feel isolated and alone and unable to see these feelings ever leaving us, or unable to get the help that we do need. Now, I do remember a chat with Bernie some years ago. He said, if you have a cough or a cast on your arm, everyone knows that you're poorly. But mental health problems start inside our heads. It affects how we feel and think, how we behave and cope. And this can happen to any one of us at any time. Now, to discuss this further, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Bernie Graham and Ben Nichols. Bernie's our psychologist at Buildforce, and Ben was introduced to us as a candidate thinking about a career in construction. So Ben served with the Paras in a 12-year career in the Armed Forces and later returned part-time and is now a reserve with the Royal Signals. So welcome to you both, and thank you for your time today. So Ben, could you tell us a bit about yourself, so your childhood and what led you to a career in the Armed Forces?
Hi Angela, hi Bernie. Yeah, of course. So I had a happy childhood. Schooling, I played a lot of football. I was very active, cross-country runner, etc. So fitness was always a big part of my teenage years, at least. And then when I left school, I went to college and done a public services course. So we done a weekend look at life with all the different services, the police, fire brigade, the armed forces, and one week in particular was with the parachute regiment. So that was probably the first seed in my head that made me think about joining the military. So one of my instructors was ex-army himself, and he kind of encouraged me to join up. So that's how it happened, really. I went to Lichfield, done my 2-day army selection, if you like, medical and fitness tests, etc. And there was a parachute regiment PTI there that day, and my first choice was actually the Royal Engineers, but he basically said to me, I'd done well on all the fitness tests, etc. And he said, have you ever thought about joining the parachute regiment? So the rest is history, really. So I joined when I was 18. And then, the first couple of years, I was posted to 1 Para in Dover, and I was B Company 1 Para, and lots of training exercises, etc. The Brecon Beacons, and but then my first tour was when I was 21 in Northern Ireland back in 2005, and that's when issues started to occur in my own mind. The first signs, really, I was losing my temper very quickly. We was in the outstations in Northern Ireland, so I'd split up with my first girlfriend at the time, and I was probably just dwelling on things because there wasn't a great deal going on in Northern Ireland at that time, and we were doing out protecting the PSNI on patrols, but not a great deal when we was in the outstations. We were kind of stagging on and not really looking at a lot. So there was a lot of downtime to to think really, and but about halfway through that tour, we were called back to do a training exercise and deploy to Iraq, and it was a very exciting time for everybody involved, really. And but between even just before that, my chain of command were noticing that there was a change in my behaviour. But that, that call to come back, it was all, everyone was excited about it. So my emotions were heightened, and between flying back from Northern Ireland to Dover, thankfully my chain of command noticed that my behaviour was erratic and it was unusual, and it got to the point where we were on the bus to go and do the 3-week training exercise, and my platoon commander got me off the bus and he said, "I don't believe that you're in the right mindset to come on this training package." But I'll always remember him saying, "I'll look forward to working with you in the future." And he got on the bus, and the bus left, and I was left on on the parade square in Dover. The rest of the battalion was still in Northern Ireland, so I was, I didn't really obviously know what was going on at that point, and the rear party were still in Dover. So, but yeah, I remember walking down the street, and I felt like I was being tested. I felt like felt like people were following me all the time. I was walking down the street, and I was always looking for cover. It was almost like army training had taken over my mind, and I was on my own little mission. It's difficult to describe really, but it was like I was in a film, or and later on the doctors described basically my brain had gone pop at that stage. But so from there I was taken to be assessed by doctors, and they took me to the Priory Hospital in Tunbridge Wells. But at that point I didn't know what was happening to me or why I was there. So I just walked out, and I got a lift from somebody in the car park. It was July 2005, I remember. So it was a summer's day, and he gave me a lift to a local pub, and I sat in the garden for the day with a group of people I didn't know. And I wasn't drinking because I didn't have any money on me, but I was just sat there, probably, I don't know, whatever state of mind I was in. But I was, it came to closing time of the pub, and I just walked the streets really, and then it got to about midnight, and I just found it. Well, I just went to sleep basically on the path somewhere. But the police were looking for me, because obviously I'd been detained to the Priory Hospital, and I'd left. So there was a duty of care to look for me. So I remember the policeman waking me up and arresting me under Section 5 for my own safety and everybody else's potentially. And they put me in a cell for a couple of days because they were looking for somewhere more secure to put me, because they didn't want to put me back in the Priory Hospital, because I just walked out of there. So, but during that time in that police cell, I still felt like I was on this test, and I was going to come out, and at the end of I passed the test, and my mind was playing tricks on me, because I thought all my friends and family would be there celebrating with me because I passed this little mission that I was on. I remember at the time, and the police officers were trying to offer me, like, I don't know, some kind of tranquilizing drugs, but I kept refusing anything they were offering me. So I was probably bouncing off the walls in that cell for a couple of days, but eventually they took me to a medium secure hospital in Milton Keynes, and they held me under Section 2 of the Mental Health Act. And for that 28-day period, I was I had 2 people assessing my behaviour 24 hours a day, so that increased the paranoia that I was experiencing. Even when I was asleep at night, there was 2 people sat outside my room, just watching me. So, and there was, the staff noticed fairly quickly that I didn't belong there. It was because I'd walked out of the Priory Hospital, and I'd just been caught up in the system. But there was a lot of seriously ill people there that had committed, serious crimes and been diagnosed with mental illnesses whilst in prison, and gone to high secure hospitals, and they'd filtered down. So I was, I remember sitting with people who had committed murder and rape and all kinds of crimes, and they've been diagnosed as psychopaths and sociopaths, and like I say, I knew I didn't belong in that hospital, but they just needed to put me somewhere secure while they could work out what was wrong with me. At that point, they could have gone on section me under Section 3, and that would have meant that I would have been discharged from the army, and but thankfully that didn't happen, and they discharged from that hospital. But I'll always remember them saying, a third of the people that have the episode that I had never come out of the system. They stay in the system their whole lives. They maybe go on medication, or they do, if they're deemed a threat to society, that they'll never leave the system. So, and then they said a third of the people that or 1/3 of the people might have another episode at some point later in their lives, and the other third will just have one episode, and it will never happen again. And like I say, that was 16 years ago. And when I left the medium school hospital, I went back to the Priory, and I was there for about another 6 weeks, and had a lot of extensive counselling and well-being therapies, stuff like Tai Chi and yoga, massages, and I looking back at it, I was well looked after by the army welfare system, and I had about a year off work in total, and then I gradually went back to work at a local unit. I had a couple of days in uniform, and then it was 3 days, and then 4 days, and then when I was ready to go back, I did. My unit welfare officer, the Wonpara unit welfare officer at the time, was visiting me at my home address every month, and then and once I was ready, I went back to work, and at that point Wonpara was in St Athan in Wales, and everyone was busy, so I just filtered back in and carried on, and I've done another 10 years in the regiment. So but what it definitely taught me was to any issues that I do have, I'm not afraid to, I've had counselling since then, and when certain things have happened in my life, and and that works for me, because I don't want to go back to where I was in 2005.
Ben, can I ask, when it originally happened to you, and you said you were dwelling on a lot of stuff, I mean, do you think it would have helped then if you would have had someone to talk to, access to counselling then? Or was that not your sort of agenda at all? It was just circumstance, and it sounded like you had an awful lot of time on your hands.
Yeah, definitely. Part of the reason why my brain went pop is because my dad's mentality was old school. Men don't have feelings, and etc. And then I joined the army at 18, and that kind of got confirmed in my young immature mind, really, that we don't have feelings. We ignore them and just carry on. So I just got to a point where, but you're right, all I wanted to do was to talk to somebody, but I didn't have the confidence, or the right mindset to open up about how I was feeling.
Yeah, I think that's very, very honest. It's interesting what you said about the third, and the third, that statistic. It's one that if you're in the sort of working in mental health, you hear statistics like that. But for me, it's very unfortunate that the public don't hear that a third of the people that have the experiences that you had, which, I mean, loosely, I think something I read that you'd written, it was sort of loosely under the heading of psychosis, that you could completely recover from it, that a third of people, have one-off episode and they completely recover. And I think that is an important information for the public to be aware of, because some of the misinformation in the past has been, oh, we have an episode like Ben's described, you don't come back from that. And many, many people do. So I think hearing your story, can inspire other people. Really can. Did you ever get a diagnosis at any point, Ben?
Psychotic episode was a diagnosis. But I'm sure you'd agree, Bernie, that you could talk to 3 different psychiatric doctors and they'd tell you a different example of a psychotic episode. So
yeah, I mean, there are, there's the main aspects that they look at, the frontline symptoms they talk about, but it is open to interpretation. It really is, for all sorts of different reasons. But you're doing well at the moment, Ben.
Yeah, every day's a learning day. But I had an episode. Well, I split up from my girlfriend fairly recently, and when things like that happen, I'm not afraid to. I've got a local therapist who I've used before, and it just helps me, to sit in a room with somebody for an hour every couple of weeks, and just get. I find I say things to a third party who's not involved in my, social circles, etc., and they don't judge you, etc., and it helps me stay on track, if you like.
Yeah. I think the non-judgmental approach is crucial for all of us. Every now and then I take myself off and I'll have a few sessions of therapy. I mean, I don't work as a face-to-face practitioner like I used to years and years ago, but I think we can all benefit, like I said, from having an ear to be listened to in a non-judgmental setting. It can be very, very supportive to help us sort of explore, what's going on and process it a bit. It's important for all of us. It really is.
Yeah. Especially in the veteran community, because that attitude that I mentioned about, we don't have feelings, etc. It's still on the surface. Mental health is obviously, it's come on leaps and bounds in the past 10 years, but there's still some people have still got the old school attitude of it's a weakness, and if that's your sat major or your line manager or wherever you are, you start to believe it.
Yeah. There's the thing about manning up and the old historical thing about lack of moral fibre and all that kind of attitude that, I totally refute and reject. Individuals get exposed to certain things, they're going to respond to them. They really are.
If someone's watching this, Bernie, and they feel someone close to them is suffering in a slightly more extreme manner, what's your immediate advice? What should they be doing straight away for them?
I think, to be there for a loved one or a close friend, to listen, and we talked about a non-judgmental approach, to listen as non-judgmentally as possible. If you are concerned, I think it may be an opportunity to seek support for them and for yourself. Maybe arrange to try and speak to your GP to get an initial discussion. If it's an acute situation, something has happened, there's an event and it seems to be very, very challenging and it seems acute, there's NHS 24/7 mental health, which is a crisis line. You can get that number by doing a Google search or going to NHS 111. There's also what I'd recommend for everybody to have. There's an app you can have on your phone called Hub of Hope. And Hub of Hope, if you put an area code in there, a postcode or a location details, it will throw up information on the phone about local mental health services, starting with the geographically closest. So there's a situation where there may be concern, where you may need some information. It could be the GP. If it's at early stages and you're a little bit worried, it could be getting in contact with Minds, the National Mental Health Charity. They've got fantastic information available. They've got a helpline. Rethink is a smaller mental health charity. They have some really good information, fact sheets and things like that. But it really does depend on the situation where you're finding yourself. In some situations, it could be a phone call to 999, because you need some emergency support. But it really would depend on the situation. I think for everybody, having as much mental health awareness, knowledge is so important, doing training in that area or attending sessions. But there are avenues out there to get that information, but it will depend so much on the individual circumstance and the position you're in.
And have you had experience where somebody doesn't want that interference, doesn't want your opinion, doesn't want your help, doesn't want anything from you? What do you do then?
All I can say is keep on trying in a non-judgmental approach. All you can do is keep on trying. It's very hard, professionally and personally. It's that kind of situation where, seriously, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And sadly, if one comes along, there's a significant event that would prompt, there's going to be intervention at some level. But all I can say is try and be as patient as you can, as non-judgmental as you can. Keep checking in. It's to be a pest and not to be a pest at the same time. In relationships, that's very difficult to do that. With a partner, that can cause issues. I would say just keep on trying and seek information, informational support, from some of those sources I've mentioned, if you're getting more and more worried.
And if you've got family members there thinking, I don't want them to be sectioned, I don't want this being on the record, I don't want the taboo about it, I don't want any of the family known, what would you say to them? I mean, Ben, is it the right thing to get sectioned? Does it just start the recovery and lets a family move on?
Can I, before Ben answers, can I say, firstly, I really like to say, Angela, getting sectioned is quite exceptional. It doesn't happen to a lot of people. Ben's, circumstances were quite exceptional from what I'm hearing, from Ben. So that can happen under those situations and circumstances. It's quite a rare thing, statistically, for it to happen. So confidentiality, is something that is maintained. Unless it's considered, there's a threat to life where you may have to step out, but always with an appropriate third party. But confidentiality is paramount for the reasons you've said. Sorry, Ben, I wanted to jump in just to the level of prevalence of that. I think it's important. But over to you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Like you say, my experience was fairly extreme, but it certainly hasn't. It didn't stop my career in the military, for example. I was promoted twice in that 10-year period. I'd done a 6-month tour in Afghanistan. My last 2 years, I was an instructor at Purbright as a PTI. So, I'd done everything I wanted to do, during my time in the army, and since I've left, it hasn't affected any job opportunities or. If anything, for me, I see it. I'm glad that happened to me because, like I say, I'm more open to talking about my feelings and emotions because I don't want to go back to where I was. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend it. Spending 28 days in a medium secure hospital, but I mean, anyone that's worried about somebody, it's better to bring it to the surface than to ignore it, isn't it? Because something worse might happen.
Yeah. I mean, the message we always try to put across is about early intervention, as early as possible, to encourage people to seek help and support. It does, correlate with better outcomes, like it does with physical health. It's a similar thing. The earlier you get help and support, generally, but not always, it's going to be better outcomes. I mean, it was interesting. The support you got from the army seemed really, really positive in many ways because of, a background of, weakness. Men don't cry, men don't have these problems. It brings us into the whole arena of stigma. that negative marking and association. But that didn't seem to sort of be an active part of what happened to you in your sort of journey with that.
No, not at all. As soon as I was taken to a doctor and be assessed, I'm not sure. It wasn't a parachute regiment doctor, for example. They took me. I think it was in Shorncliffe where they took me. But yeah, from that point onwards, it was. I think they took me straight to the Priory Hospital. So because at that time, DCMH was being refurbed. There weren't as many. I mean, today there's DCMHs all over the country, aren't there? But I think at that time there was only one in Catterick, if I remember rightly. But
Did you those initials, Ben? DCMH.
Sorry.
What can you explain those initials? The DCMH
Department Community Mental Health.
Right, because they can be different around, different parts of the country, and this is something that isn't helpful. Things can be called different things in different parts of the country. Because I wasn't 100% sure myself what you were describing, but places where people can be detained under the Mental Health Act.
Yeah, exactly. It's a military mental health hospital.
Thanks.
But it's grown in recent years. They've got hubs all over the country. So.
Okay, because that was learning for me. I mean, have you had the interaction with TILS, which is the NHS support service around veteran community regarding mental health?
Yeah, so I earlier on this year I was working for a military charity supporting veterans who enter the criminal justice system. A project called Project Nova. So I was the Northampton coordinator, and any veteran that's arrested should be referred to Project Nova, and then from there we always referred straight to TILS. And every case was different, as you explained earlier. Some needed housing, some needed most needed mental health support, addiction, employment when they're ready for it. But yeah, TILS is a really good service. And I don't know if you've heard the sister. Well, it's grown since then. There's now Here's the High Intensity Service.
Yes, yeah, they've got different levels of intervention. Yeah, certainly become familiar with that, and I think it's great that the service, the NHS, has been able to focus on the veteran community.
Definitely, yeah.
It's been really good. But as World Mental Health Day, I think the key part of it is that mental health affects us all. We've all got it, for good, for bad. It's something, like physical health, it's with us, and it varies and it can change. In the past, I've had my issues where, I carried a diagnosis for 18 months of clinical depression and anxiety from my work and some nasty events and some poor choices on my part as well, and it can affect us all. And I think I was watching last night, and everybody saw Hairy Bikers Go North. I'm a big fan of the Hairy Bikers. I do like food, and Simon had issues himself, one of the Hairy Bikers, and he said to go through life and not to have problems with your mental health at all, you got to be incredibly lucky. And I think that's a very, very fair quote.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's like, anybody goes through life without having any physical health problems. If someone said, you do this, I've never had a day's illness in my life, it's really, really accurate. But we all have something at some point, and I think physical health, similar with mental health as well.
Yeah, when the time I spent in the Priory Hospital, the staff always said, as you've explained, it can happen to anybody in all walks of life. Maybe not as extreme as what happened to me, but some form of depression or anxiety or whatever it may be will probably affect most people at some point in their lives.
I believe so. And Ben, you talking about it so openly, about one of the areas where, people start to all psychosis, psychotic, people, back off a little bit. Oh, this is your proper mental illness. For you to talk about it so openly and explain that, you've gone on this, recovery journey. No, that's a bit of a hackneyed expression, but you've done it. You've achieved it. You've come out the other end. You haven't had another episode. I think it's inspirational for people to hear that, because in the past, when people have had that kind of diagnosis of having a psychotic episode or being psychotic, it's like, oof, that's it for life. And it's never been accurate, but it's been misrepresented. So it's so helpful and inspiring for someone like you that's been through it to talk about it, particularly, when you've worked in a background where this often has been something you don't talk about.
Mm.
I mean, part of what Build Force does is, we want things out in the open, so
Exactly, yeah.
people work to enable them to go on that process to get, into work in the construction industry. So, your input on this is so helpful. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Benny, and that's the reason I do it. I first, some of the people, a lot of the blokes I served with didn't even realise that happened to me, because I spent, I went away for a while, but the battalion were busy away on operations, and then I just filtered back in and continued. But I think it was about 2 years ago where I on a social media platform, and I basically told my story, what happened to me, and for a few reasons really, but mainly to help other people to come out and feel comfortable, to talk about their issues, and that's exactly what happened. So that gave me the desire to keep doing that. And what I find with veterans in, when I was working for the military charity, I've stayed in touch with a lot of them, and one in particular is an older guy. I won't go into details about his case, but he's quite isolated. So I took him to a veterans breakfast club over the weekend, and all of a sudden is with 40 veterans, and that's what most people need, just a non-judgmental attitude to and feel at ease to talk about what's going on in their own minds, or what's happened to them, and not be judged.
Yeah, I think social support and social connection is crucial for our better, more positive mental health. Have people around you, people in your corner. And I think in isolation, loneliness, there's no social connection, no one to share things with, not to get any other person's perspective, or people being there for you when you really need them. It's crucial. And and if it can be in a non-judgmental environment, or somewhere where you can just lose yourself and have a bit of fun. It doesn't have to be always talking about the stuff, but just to be somewhere amongst people and lose yourself in that can be so beneficial for people as well.
And Bernie, you mentioned you like hairy bikers, you like food. And Ben, you mentioned you liked, you mentioned personal training and your fitness. What else is a good day? What else makes you feel good?
Is that for me, or
any guilty pleasures you want to share?
Guilty pleasures? Well, I don't drink as much as I used to when I was younger. I sailed a bit close to the wind. I'm going to be honest. I think this is the time to be honest. I sailed a bit close to the wind with that when I was younger. For me, beneficial stuff is being around friends, social interaction, the social connection, getting out with the dog. Love getting out with the dog. I'm lucky. I live by the sea. I've got the moors. Getting out into the natural environment, which is hugely important to me. Connecting there. Getting out. During the COVID period, for so many people, it was so restricting. I've got a partner and kids, so I was lucky I had some kind of connection. But for people on their own, I had a very, very difficult time. But those are the kind of things, besides eating and drinking, that I really enjoy. What about you, Ben? What are the things you do now?
Yeah, I enjoy. Friends and family, definitely. I practice yoga most days, which most mornings, which is a great way to start the day, not just for flexibility core strength, etc. But just a positive mindset. I'm a Manchester United fan, so watching Ronaldo pull on a United shirt definitely makes me happy. Yeah, I enjoy running, going to the gym, etc. And yeah,
exercise is really important for you. I'm lazy in what I do these days. I mean, I do get out and walk. I love walking, but clearly the physical stuff is really important, and it is for so many people. To do physical exercise as well. It's huge. It really is.
If I don't go to the gym, which recently I've moved house and I got out of the routine, I do notice it. Exercise, produces endorphins and all kinds of things for your body, doesn't it? So
yeah, you said before, Ben, watching for triggers. So watching just what stresses you out, and this is a theme that we constantly hear from Bernie, to the point where he actually wrote a stress management program to make people aware of what stress is and how it affects you.
Yeah.
And is that a recurring theme, Bernie? Do you see that a lot?
Yes, it is. I mean, the stress management and mental health session we do every other month for Build Force is becoming increasingly more well attended. At first, we had half a dozen people maybe turn up. The last two, we've had 15, 20 people. No, not quite 20. I'll be telling a lie. But we had about 15, 16 people. And I think if you could look for a silver lining possibly around COVID, is people have become more aware. Mental health has been talked about that much more. And I think guys, I think through the really hard work of Caroline, Leah, and you, Angela, people are now, attending the stress management and mental health session as part of, being involved with Build Force. It's part of the program. And I think people are benefiting from it. I hope they are. It's preparing them for that, supporting the transition. And it is about knowing yourself, becoming aware, and knowing what works for you as well as the triggers, because it's so individual. It really is. Some kinds of meditation, mindfulness work for some people. It's the last thing other people would do. It's about getting to know yourself, being more aware of what the triggers are for you, and also the things that work for you to soothe, if you like, and help you when things are difficult. But I think it's recognizing as well that, we're all going to take hits in life. There's no way of saying goodbye to adversity. It's going to happen. It's being as prepared as we can, and also knowing what to do when we take a hit, and if you liked, how to bounce forward from those sort of experiences.
Yeah.
What do you do, Angela? What do you do to look after yourself?
What I do, so I love to read, but I need to read alone. So I just need to be off either in my bedroom or just hiding in a corner. But I'm not very good at reading for 10, 20, 30 minutes. I need to know I've got a block of about 4 hours that I can just devour a book. So it doesn't happen often, but that's when I just, life is bliss when I get that opportunity. So that's, yeah.
What's the best?
I dream about it, actually. I don't do it.
What's the best book you've read, Angela?
Well, Bernie and I were speaking about this the other week, actually. So we both recently read a book. I think it hit the bestseller list last year, wasn't it? Was it Shuggie Bain? So about the young Glaswegian boy whose mother was an alcoholic.
Oh, yes.
And that had me in tears. That book, I was utterly heartbroken and bereft at the end. And then you just saw him bounce back. And I don't want to kind of ruin it for anybody, but he befriended a young girl whose mother was also an alcoholic. And the time he invested in her to say, we always focus on the person that's struggling, but sometimes the people left behind just need that help and attention. And I thought it was just a very subtle way of, if you are going through this is my advice to you. I know that book stayed with me for weeks. Every time I thought about it, I got upset, but it's so brilliantly written. And it shared parts of Glasgow and a kind of upbringing that maybe my mum and dad had seen as well. So there was just a lot about the book that hit nerve. So I don't often cry over them, but that one did.
It was also funny in parts as well.
Oh, it's hysterical.
Which really helped with the contrast. I think when things about serious subjects have some humour in them, appropriate humour, it can really, it can enhance the impact of them. And do you read much, Ben? Is that something?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, I like reading autobiographies more than. Yeah, I'd have to say Tyson Fury's. Well, he's got a couple of books out, but he's very open about his mental health, etc.
Yes, he has been, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And there's a few boxers. Joe Kawasaki, he spoke about his mental health. I think, when people, sports people talk about their mental health and the issues they've had, I was talking to Patsy, my partner, we were it was a football player recently. I mean, there's a number of them that have spoken about their mental health. I mean, Tony Adams, Paul Merton, years of my generation. There's a few others. Aaron Lennon was a player as well. When people in the public eye talk about it, it opens the door.
It's powerful, yeah.
It really is. And I know Tyson Fury has been, about his difficulties. It really, really does help. It really helps when people speak about it.
Yeah. The more people that speak about it, the more other people will feel comfortable.
But it's out there. It's out in the open. It's not this hidden thing, that we whisper about. Talk about it. We've all got it. It happens. It makes it more accessible, makes things easier all round.
And a question for me, Ben, are Man U going to win the league?
It's going to be a long season. As much as I want to say yes, I don't think so this year.
Right, okay, but you think it's on the cards? You think there's a comeback?
Well, there's always a chance.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a chance when you've got the best player in the world in your team.
That's devotion and love right there for you.
That's commitment. If I talked about football, I get quite depressed at the moment. I'm a Tottenham. I don't know what's going on. Complete unknown at Tottenham. Yeah, really is.
A heartfelt thank you to both of you for sharing your story and your football teams. And I'm a Rangers supporter.
Yeah.
But we do know that Belfour's obviously invest heavily in the mental health programme, Bernie, as you've said, and it's as you've always preached to us, it's likely many of us will struggle at points in our life. So whether it's in our military career or our civilian one, it's good to know that there's people out there that care. So if you are watching and you would like to chat, please get in touch with the Build Force team. I'll share our details on the organisations that were discussed today. Or if you'd like to chat with Bernie or Ben and share your own experiences, we're happy to arrange that for you. So on Ben's wise words, recognise your stress levels and take care and get bendy in the morning. So it's all about yoga as well. But listen, best wishes to you all and look after yourselves. And thank you very much for sharing your stories this evening. We really appreciate that. And hopefully catch up soon.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me, Angela, and good to talk to you, Bernie.
Yeah, really nice to meet you, Ben, and thank you. Really, really big thank you for sharing your story. It helps.